I think, a very spot-on reflection in the scope of technology, the use of technology, and how we know that technology is also part of what has caused the current situation in the climate emergency. It's not the sole problem, but it is part of the problem. We are using it here as a solution. What I find very, very interesting about the projects that we've presented here and that I support fully is that these are projects that are operated by communities that are not a technology push, but are trying to use technology as much as possible for a greater good, and that should not use extra layers of technology when they are not solving a problem, because innovation is not free by any means. And so thank you for this reflection. Then with these words, we can, I think, go on our discussion. These three projects were amazing. I wanted to ask you, because as we've seen here, everything that you are doing is truly impactful and necessary. Necessary for local communities, necessary for everybody, because at the end of the day, rainforests, whales, trees in semi-arid regions or in tropical regions, every tree on the planet, nature is what is actually our most important source to fight the climate change. And I wanted to ask you, who do you think that should be responsible for funding these activities, and how do you fund the continuation of these activities? How can you make sure that these activities continue to exist and evolve? Because what is very difficult right now is who pays for nature protection, right? I don't know, any thoughts about this?
Oui, merci Laia. Et effectivement, l'innovation.
Yes, sure, innovation is important, and I think that yes. So we were awarded an award by the United Nations, and many communities have benefited from our project. The women who receive this payment and their life changes, and technology helps these women to benefit from technology. Technology gives courage to women to maintain these and to keep these plots of land. And we hope to expand the project even more and to replicate this activity somewhere else. And maybe Niger, thanks to technology, will be a different country that will be able to develop, thank you to the CO2 credits, and that the quality of life of women will be better, and women will be able to have a source of income. So thanks to the CO2 credits, we hope so, and we hope that women can say that technology contributed to change their lives.
It's not only about carbon, as you explained.
Yes.
And there needs to be someone also covering that other thing that doesn't have a voluntary market, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at my end, I don't think we can deny technology. You know, it's stupid saying, let's not use these new tools, let's use the old tools. And again, what I was trying to do, not as successfully as I hoped to at the end, was, you know, I've been in this business a long time, and for a long time they're like, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed, you know, let's put out the fire. When what I tried to say at the end is, you know, it's all about framing. And I think this is an incredible opportunity. You know, I think it's the greatest opportunity that has faced any generation previously. You know, so let's get out and do it, and let's not fight amongst ourselves. And you know what? You can't live like debt-free. Do you know what I mean? Am I a hypocrite in coming here? Absolutely. I mean, I came on an airplane, but we've got to educate, we've got to collaborate, we've got to innovate. Do you know what I mean? We've got to work together. And I think, I believe in humanity. And I would say, and I'm sorry I'm showing my age here, but when the Berlin Wall fell, it happened so quickly, the newspapers couldn't keep up with it. Do you know what I mean? The same with the collapse of the Soviet Union. If people decide we've had enough and don't bicker within each other, accept that there is a cost of living, and everybody take baby steps, mic drop.
So, something else, it's like, it's very difficult for humans to act upon things we cannot measure. And there is a lot about measurement here and about bringing evidence of things that we probably suspect already, but by tagging these measurements, we enable action. What about the rainforest connection? How do you see the sustainability of the model?
Yeah, good question. Well, I did want to say about the funding. I think in an ideal world, those responsible corporations, individuals, and countries responsible for the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis would be the ones paying for it. I think something like the Global Biodiversity Framework is a step towards that, to enable international cooperation towards funding mechanisms. But yeah, funding is always hard. We're always looking for more long-term solutions, because these are long-term problems that aren't going away anytime. Like, I would love to not exist, but we are needed.
Are these mostly philanthropic projects?
Yeah, I mean, each project is, we are funded by corporations, foundations, and some governments as well.
And you mentioned the biodiversity. Also, we have in Europe the nature restoration law that was newly passed in July, and that is that was passed very tightly, and that is moving the pieces so that in the short future we can have needs in terms of reporting on nature evolution and ecosystem health as well. And I was wondering, did you see any change from what happened in Montreal last year, where there was an agreement of 100 of countries signing that they really care about biodiversity, they really care about nature conservation? Have you seen a change in your projects?
I think there's been a lot more corporates who are interested in biodiversity, which is both great, but also, as we know, it's scary. They're really good at greenwashing, right? But that's why when a corporation wants to work with us, like, you can't make up acoustic data, okay? Unless you're really good at imitating bird calls. You can't make that up, so it becomes a really transparent data source. So when a corporation wants to work with us to create transparent data on their biodiversity impacts, we see that as a positive. And ultimately, we have to be working with these corporates to enable global change.
Okay, so you see a corporation can measure the impact of their activities by using the Rainforest Connection technology?
But even all of it, I mean, I think to me that's what's exciting about technology. When I went and did a project with a whale in the past, I had to assess the assessment. How much did I harass it? Well, that's a very personal thing, when now I can show people the camera feed from the drone, and it's very clear data. So having these sensors that can avoid sort of corruption or manipulation, at a general level, I think it's a huge thing. I will say, I think the funding is a real challenge, and I liked a couple of the talks we had earlier about true price and whatever, because, I actually think the funding structure is a little broken. There aren't funds out there typically from foundations to fund innovation, and I think a table has 3 legs or whatever. You need all the different pieces to have a stable platform. You can't just be leaning one way or the other. So, but I think almost I'd say on Montreal, though, I think what it has given people, I hope, which is my key thing, is hope. You know, I think we need to believe. I think people are becoming disenfranchised because they're overwhelmed and they're depressed and they're like, I can't make any difference, and they give up, and we need hope, you know.
Okay. I wanted to ask something to Isaa particularly, because I go to a lot of climate forums like COP or Climate Week in New York, just happened last month, and I see a lot of projects that speak about measuring the CO2 in payment for ecosystem services, but none has community engagement like JESAC, none. And from my understanding, it is a real change because it gives sustainability to this actual project. How was your experience in incorporating technology, like giving like community and technology weight and merging these two together? How was it?
Je pense que c'est l'innovation, bien que le Niger c'est.
Well, I said that Niger is a country in which 20% of the country has been to school, has been educated. So education is used to pay this project, and it gives safety to the community. They prefer this way of payment. And instead of cash for work, they prefer this system because it allows them to have the money immediately and in a confidential and private way. So this has this meant an important change, and there are many other projects that want to learn from us. For example, we want to implement this type of project like in food security. We need to put together technology and people so that the project is sustainable. Technology and people. It is an important aspect, undoubtedly.
Also to check if there is questions from the audience before we continue. Yes? It's very important also, I remember, because during this project, it was very difficult to travel because there was war in Niger and Burkina Faso. Yes. We could not speak to the people in the field they helped calibrate the algorithms. Yes. They help with the information, and we try to help them in how to measure the trees. We define protocols together. It was not easy. It took longer than if you do it just like from a computer, and it just works. But then we see here that working together pays off. So, first question?
Yes, cette question c'est pour Isaa. Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your speech. It is a very inspiring project. And I would like to know more details about the life cycle of this project. We see a lot of projects planting trees like the Billion Tree Initiative, Trillion Tree Initiative, but some of the trees die after 15 years. And to have furniture or like the sacred baobabs. So what would be the life cycle, or how much do they last, these trees? How many years? Well, it is a very relevant question about the life expectancy of these trees. These trees are from 2 species, and they have an economic goal and a medicinal goal. In Africa, we still treat a lot of diseases with traditional medicine. It's very enrooted in Africa. It is in our culture. So it's the communities that decide which trees need to be planted, because baobabs it's a source of food. It has a lot of iron, so we do a lot of preparations, and we also do baobab juices, and so we plant different types of plants, of trees, like for example acacias, and they have a life expectancy of 30-35 years, and we also produce different byproducts from the trees that are exported, and so this is the reality. So we needed to have these species that can overcome the droughts that happen in our country.
The evidence, we have the enabling a business for local communities,
Yes.
the impact on youth and
And
women.
the medicinal, we use the tree for the medicinal in my country.
We use the benefit of
Exactly.
what's created for the community. And let me add, we have the ecology.
Ecology, yes.
Because these are species that are ecologically responsible for that area. And this is helping all of us here. So that's amazing. Another question?
Hi, thank you all of you for sharing your experience. And hearing you, I kind of, it's really clear, like when data is turned into information, it turns really valuable. But I couldn't stop like noticing when you mentioned like you all struggle with funding or financing your projects. So kind of what I was wondering is, because the information you're generating has like a user that usually are NGOs or governments or all these like high-level entities that can actually make something out of it, but I think is and are the institutions that have the funding that probably you all need. But when you struggle to get a grant on innovation because you're too innovative, but you have like an audience of people who actually can get the value you're generating, are there other ways rather than donation systems that can cut the middlemen that we have, like the government entities or corporations or greenwashing or whatever you want to call it, campaigns or initiatives that could bring the value of information you're generating to broader audiences? I see the JESAC project is kind of an example of that, but how do you scale that to the global problem we're facing? It's like a two-part question. I don't know if I actually made a question, but
so
I don't know.
To summarize,
Okay.
but no. Keep the microphone.
To summarize, how do you see like the scaling problem of the solutions, the funding problem, given that you have like this this middleman that are governments, NGOs, or large corporations that can see the value of the information you're generating, but how do you bring that value to regular people, like the ones here in this room?
Okay.
I don't have an answer for regular people, but Rainforest Connection does have an interesting business model. We have both a nonprofit and a for-profit. So as more corporations came to us and wanted us to help them in their biodiversity monitoring, they have a lot of money, so they would just pay us. And what we've now done is in those projects basically help fund the nonprofit projects, which are the more needful with the smaller organizations and in communities that wouldn't be able to afford working with us without that.
Well, I wish I had an answer. I mean, I think at my end, certainly I feel the data we've collected, we've been very successful in saying this time of the year, whales are mating or whales are feeding in this region, and we found governments all over the world, from Papua New Guinea to the Indian Ocean, Mauritius. When we tell them this is a critical time for biodiversity, 9 times out of 10, quite quickly, they've sort of acted upon that information. So you'd be surprised, again, most of us tend to think in the first world model. I'm an ocean guy, and when a whale swims around Cape Horn, it doesn't go, woohoo, I'm in the Pacific or the Atlantic. It's like one ocean. So, I'm trying to focus on getting tools to people that need it and getting people to, I just believe in humanity. I know it's hard too. The corporations are only making the stuff that we're buying, so it's our fault at the end of the day, personally, I think. But I don't have an answer to the funding problem, but I do believe that the data is important, and it's working. I really do believe it's working.
Okay, so I think we reached the end of another question. Okay, one last question here in the first row.
Thanks everyone for listening to our speech. It came from frustration we all felt for the past few days at failing to address the underlying systems that have brought us into this mess. And we noticed this as well with some of the speakers. So I have a question to the Rainforest AI company and the drone whale company. Do you really believe that using more technology is the way forward? Do you believe that a technocratic approach to nature is the way we can get out of this? And don't you believe that it is exactly this mindset that has got us into the place where we are now? Thank you.
Well, I'll start with that. You actually left when I made a comment earlier, and my comment is, it isn't about the technology, it's about the people. But I believe we would be ignorant to say, don't use a computer, let's use a pencil. And I think that we mentioned this earlier, I think there's a veracity to a lot of the tools we have now. When you take a photograph, technically speaking, people will look at that. When you look at an image, people will understand and be impassioned by that. And on one level, it really is about capturing hearts and minds. If you want to change the world, you can be angry at people. Generally, being angry doesn't work. Generally, you engage people, you capture hearts and minds, and they understand the value of a healthy environment. To be clear, just so you know, maybe you don't know this, but most people like me, I could have gone and made a hell of a lot of money doing something else. We do this because we care like you do.
So, with these words, and I think that question is very much at my heart. I run a remote sensing company. In my field, people are obsessed and in love with satellites. Satellites are very expensive things that cause a lot of harm as well in terms of cost benefit and for the environment and for the people. And we measure and we ask ourselves at every project, are we solving something? Are we impacting positively or not? And where should we stand? If I don't go to COP this year because I don't support the way the COP is done, am I helping anybody? Am I helping anybody? Not raising my voice in that in that arena, where a lot of oil and gas companies, stakeholders are growing and growing and growing every year. No, I have to be there. I have to raise my voice. It's very important. And it's a little bit the same thing. Like, we need to use technology for what's, this is my personal opinion, but for what it's useful for. And I think that it's great that we sit here together. We don't forget about this reflection, that we keep it in our agendas, and that we also keep hearing about these amazing projects that, as we see here, are impacting a lot of lives and ecosystems. So with this, I think that we must close the session, and thank you all for joining us. I hope it was okay. Yeah. I love my bag. It's the best. I'm going to wear it every day. I'm like, it's the best bag.